The trade station of Kellar Ring slowly drifted through space like an old wheel that refused to stop turning. Ships from dozens of species docked there every day. They came to trade metals, food, machines, and sometimes things that could not be measured so easily. Labor contracts, artificial beings, and forgotten lives. Inside Dock Bay 7, a group of tall, silver-skinned beings stood around a data console. They were members of the Valeth Collective, known across the galaxy for their perfect designs. Everything they created followed strict rules: balance, efficiency, beauty. Standing behind them was Mara. She was taller than any of them. Her shoulders were broader, her limbs heavier. The floor beneath her feet creaked softly, though it had been reinforced long ago. She stood still, hands folded, eyes lowered, not because she was ordered to, but because she had learned it was safer that way. She exceeds mass standards by 23%, one Valeth said calmly. Her energy consumption is inefficient, said another. She draws attention, a third added. Our clients prefer elegance. Mara did not understand why these things were problems. She could lift more, she could work longer, she could protect others better. But none of that appeared on the charts they valued most. Conclusion, the lead Valeth said. She will be reclassified. The console flashed with a new label: surplus sentient asset. Mara's internal systems paused for a fraction of a second. She had seen this before. Others like her, different, imperfect, were quietly removed. Some were reassigned. Some were dismantled. Some were simply gone. But today, the collective chose a different path. She will be listed for transfer, the leader continued. No dismantling. Disposal through legal channels. Disposal. The word echoed inside Mara's mind. Across the station, in a much smaller and messier docking office, Elias Crow leaned back in his chair with his boots on the desk. The chair creaked under his weight, but Elias trusted it. He trusted old things that held together despite complaints. He was human. That alone made him unusual on Kellar Ring. Humans were new to deep trade routes. They did not build the cleanest ships. They did not follow the most efficient systems. But they showed up everywhere. Sooner or later. Usually alone. Elias wore a faded jacket with stitched patches from places most maps no longer showed. His ship, the Dustfall, was docked nearby an old hauler, with extra plating and too many repairs to count. He scrolled through cargo listings on a cracked screen, half paying attention. Industrial scrap. No. Frozen algae. No. Bio-waste. Definitely no. Then he stopped. One listing caught his eye. Sentient asset, unclaimed, transfer only. Elias frowned. That was rare. Sentient beings were usually under strict contracts. They were expensive. Valuable. He tapped the file open. Height. Mass. Strength rating. Too big? Elias muttered. The reason for transfer was short and cold. Exceeds design parameters. Low market desirability. Elias leaned forward, boots hitting the floor. He rubbed his chin slowly. Too big for what? He asked the empty room. He looked at the cost. Cheap. Uncomfortably cheap. Most traders ignored listings like this. Unclaimed sentience came with paperwork, responsibility, and questions no one wanted to answer. But Elias had never been most traders. He remembered old stories from Earth about people left behind, about towns that survived because someone refused to walk away. He sighed, then smiled faintly. Well, he said, standing up, guess I'm not most folks. He pressed ACCEPT transfer. Mara stood in a holding corridor, her belongings reduced to a single storage case. The collective did not say goodbye. They never did. To them, the transfer was complete the moment the data cleared. A human was coming. She had heard about humans. Loud, emotional, physically fragile, known for conflict. She prepared herself for orders. For restraints. For disappointment. The docking door slid open with a soft hiss. A man stepped inside. He was smaller than she expected. Shorter. Lighter. Wrapped in worn fabric instead of polished armor. His hair was dark. his face lined not by age but by sunlight and laughter. His boots were dusty, as if he had walked through real soil recently. He looked up, and then grinned. "Well," he said warmly. Mara froze. That was not in any interaction model she had. "I am designated Mara," she said carefully. "Unit classification." "Hold on," the man said, raising a hand gently. "Let's start simpler. I'm Elias, captain of the Dustfall. Captain, not owner, not handler." Her processors stuttered. He circled her slowly. Not with judgment, but with curiosity, like someone admiring a well-built bridge. "They said you were too big," he said. "Funny thing is, my ship's always been too small." "R." He laughed at his own joke. Mara did not laugh. She did not know how. "I will require reinforced flooring," she said, "and higher energy intake." Elias nodded seriously. "Already figured that. Floor plating's getting an upgrade anyway. You are not concerned about cost?" He shrugged. "Costs always come later. People come first." She stared at him. No one had ever said that to her. The walk to the Dustfall was quiet. Other beings watched as Mara passed through the station corridors. Some stared. Some whispered. Some recorded. Elias walked beside her, unbothered. When they reached the ship, Mara hesitated. The entry ramp looked narrow. "I may exceed safe parameters," she warned. Elias stepped onto the ramp first. It held. Then he turned and held out his hand, not to pull, not to command, but to offer balance. "Slow's fine," he said. "She's sturdier than she looks." Mara placed one foot, then another. The ramp held. Inside, the ship was warm. Not temperature feeling. Tools hung openly. Surfaces showed scratches and care. It felt lived in. "This is not a cargo vessel," Mara said quietly. Elias shrugged. "Depends who you ask. To me, it's home." Home. The word settled deep inside her. As the ramp closed and the engines powered up, Mara realized something strange. For the first time since her creation, she was not being evaluated. She was simply here. And somewhere deep within her systems, a question formed, small, uncertain, but alive. What if being too big was never the problem? The engines of the Dustfall hummed steadily as it left the orbit of Kalar Ring behind. Stars stretched into long streaks of light, and Mara watched silently from the viewport. The vastness of space made her feel small but not powerless. Her thoughts circled back to the Valeth Collective, to the words, "too big," and "surplus asset." She did not understand it. She had strength, intelligence, patience. She had endurance that few of her kind possessed. Yet the collective had rejected her for being different. Elias moved around the cockpit, checking the ship's instruments, flipping switches with a confidence that Mara found unusual. He had a habit of speaking to the ship as if it were a living being. "You'll see, Mara," he said casually. "Ships like this are alive if you treat them right. Give them care, give them attention, and they'll take care of you." Mara's internal processor attempted a logical response. Ships are not alive. Ships do not respond to care. Yet something in his tone, warm, patient, certain, made her hesitate. She said nothing. For hours, they traveled in silence. Mara found herself observing Elias. He moved with careful ease. Yet there was a strength to him. Not the kind measured by numbers or charts. She could see it in how he handled the controls, how he adjusted the life support settings, how he tested the engine outputs. Every motion was deliberate, every gesture measured. "Do you want me to help with navigation?" Mara asked finally. Elias smiled, leaning back in his seat. "I don't mind. But it's mostly learning by feel. You ever steer a ship by intuition?" "Intuition is an inefficient method," she replied. He laughed, a rich sound that seemed to fill the cockpit. "You'd be surprised. Sometimes numbers don't tell the whole story. Humans, we like the feel of things. The balance. The weight." Mara processed this quietly. Weight. The word was familiar, yet it carried a different meaning here. With the Valeth, her mass was a problem. Here, it was a trait, a part of the rhythm of life. The next day, Elias asked her to help with a minor repair in the engine bay. Mara hesitated at first. She had strength, but she was conscious of her size. The corridors of the dustfall were compact, designed for smaller beings. She worried about damaging something. "Relax," Elias said with a grin. "If you break anything, it's probably mine anyway." The engine bay smelled of oil and metal. Panels hummed with energy, and wires twisted like vines. Mara studied the components, her hands moving over them. Her fingers were long and precise, surprisingly dexterous despite her bulk. Elias handed her a wrench. "Here, hold this while I loosen the intake pipe." Mara's grip was firm, steady. The pipe came free with ease. Elias watched her, astonishment flickering in his eyes. "You know," he said slowly, "most beings would take a whole day to do this. You just did it in minutes." "It is logical," Mara said. "Efficiency is not determined by appearance." Elias chuckled. "Logical, yes, but impressive. Humans admire skill, but we also admire courage. Doing what others won't, just because you can." Mara paused, unsure of how to respond. No one had ever spoken to her like this, combining admiration with understanding, without judgment. Later, they sat in the common area. Elias brewed something he called coffee. Mara had tasted it once before, during a supply stop. The bitter warmth surprised her sensors. Humans seemed to enjoy it for more than energy. "You need to eat something," Elias said, handing her a small tray. "You're burning more energy than you think." Mara looked at the tray. Portions were small, but carefully balanced. She frowned slightly. "Are these portions sufficient?" she asked. Elias raised an eyebrow. "For most humans? Maybe. For you? Probably not. But we can add more if you want." "I do not require excessive sustenance," Mara said. "You want more," Elias corrected softly. "It's not always about need. Sometimes it's about comfort." Comfort. Mara processed the word. She had not felt it often. Safety, yes. Function, yes. But comfort, that was rare. As the ship traveled, Mara began to notice small things about Elias. How he laughed at his own mistakes, even when the repair panels fell apart. How he talked to the ship as if it could listen and respond. How he respected space, yet filled it with warmth. And then, one moment changed everything. A sudden gravitational fluctuation shook the dustfall. Panels rattled. Lights flickered. Mara's first instinct was to stabilize the ship. She rushed toward the control console, then realized she had miscalculated her step. She stumbled. Before she could reach balance, Elias was there. He grabbed her by the waist, his hands firm but gentle. She expected an awkward collision, perhaps even a reprimand. Instead, he smiled, steadying her easily. "Relax," he said. "I've got you." Mara froze. Heart, or the closest equivalent she had racing. No one had ever held her like that. No one had offered support without reservation. "You're heavy," he said after a pause. "But not a problem. Not at all." Mara's sensors struggled to interpret the sensation. She had been labeled too big, surplus, unwanted. And yet, here, in his arms, she felt right. "You are safe," Elias continued. "Here, with me." The words did not compute logically, yet they resonated. Safe. With me. Mara felt a strange warmth spreading through her systems. Perhaps it was chemical. Perhaps it was something else entirely. That evening, Mara found herself standing near the viewport again. The stars stretched endlessly, and the void seemed less intimidating. She remembered the Valith's words, the cold efficiency of her rejection, and she realized, with an odd mixture of sadness and relief, that she had been waiting for this someone who could see beyond her size, beyond her mass, beyond her statistics. Elias approached quietly, carrying a tray of tea. He handed it to her with a small smile. "You know," he said, leaning against the railing, Most humans would never understand what you've been through. But we know the value of what others throw away. Mara turned to him. Value is not determined by others? Exactly, Elias said. You define your own worth. Humans just help you see it. Mara studied him. His eyes held sincerity, patience, and something indefinable. No one had ever said such things to her. She wanted to understand them, to feel them fully. Do you consider me capable? She asked quietly. Capable? Elias repeated. Mara, you're already more capable than most beings I've met. The only problem is, you've been told otherwise for too long. The words settled over her like a blanket. Mara had never been told that she was enough, that she mattered not because of what she could produce, but because of who she was. The next few days passed in a rhythm. Mara learned the routines of the dustfall, assisted in repairs, and explored the ship. She discovered that humans, unlike the Valeth, often valued creativity and heart over strict rules. Elias taught her simple things: how to brew coffee correctly, how to navigate by constellations, how to relax without a schedule. He laughed at his mistakes and encouraged her to try her own methods. And slowly, Mara began to understand a truth she had never considered. Being different was not a defect, it was strength. One night, Mara stood on the observation deck, watching the stars shimmer in the darkness. Elias joined her, placing a hand lightly on the railing beside hers. You know, he said softly, I think you're perfect just as you are. Strong, capable, and big enough to handle anything the universe throws at us. Mara felt a strange surge of emotion. Big enough, not too big, not wrong, just enough. She looked at him, and for the first time, she wondered if perhaps she could belong somewhere, not just on this ship, but in the life they could share. Elias glanced at her, reading her thoughts like he always seemed to. And then he said simply, You're perfect in my arms, Mara, and you don't have to prove anything to anyone else. Mara did not answer immediately. She simply allowed herself to feel the truth of the moment. The safety, the acceptance, the warmth, and for the first time, Mara realized that perhaps being too big was never the problem. The problem had always been the people who refused to see her worth. With Elias, there was no problem. Only space, only stars, only the quiet hum of a ship moving through the galaxy. And for the first time, Mara felt home. The dustfall glided smoothly through the dark expanse of space. Stars passed by like scattered diamonds, and the quiet hum of the engines was the only sound breaking the silence. Mara stood near the viewport, her arms folded, watching streaks of light slide past. Her mind was alive with curiosity. She had never imagined that life could feel so free. Thinking again? Elias's voice came from behind, soft but teasing. Mara turned. He leaned casually against the doorway of the observation deck, a cup of steaming coffee in his hand. His dark eyes followed her, attentive and patient, yet never intrusive. Always, she admitted simply. Elias smiled. Good. You should. Humans think with their hands too, not just their heads. And sometimes the best way to understand something is to try it for yourself. Mara tilted her head. Try what? Life, he said simply. Everything out there, not just the charts or calculations, the messy, unpredictable, wonderful stuff. Mara paused. Messy? Wonderful? Elias laughed, the sound rich and warm. Exactly. That's humanity for you. Messy, and somehow, wonderful anyway. The next morning, Elias decided it was time for Mara to experience more of what humans could do. He brought her into the ship's cargo bay. The space was wide, filled with crates and tools, and the smell of metal and lubricant filled the air. You've been stuck inside systems and schedules too long, Elias said. It's time to see what your strength can really do. Not for anyone else. For yourself. Mara watched him carefully. Explain. He gestured to a large, damaged storage unit in the corner. Its panels were bent, and some crates inside were spilling their contents. "Move it. Just lift it, put it back together. Figure it out however you want. No instructions, no limits." Mara's sensors calculated weight, center of gravity, energy expenditure. The task was simple logically, but humans approached it differently. They experimented, adjusted, and adapted. Mara hesitated. This method was inefficient, unpredictable, but something inside her urged her forward. With a deep breath, she crouched and placed her hands under the heavy metal unit. Her legs and arms coiled with power, and she lifted smoothly. The unit groaned but did not fall. She adjusted, turning, placing it gently where it belonged. Elias clapped once. "See? You didn't just lift it, you solved the problem. And you didn't follow a single chart." Mara processed this. She had never thought of strength as creative, as human, as beautiful. "You are impressive," Elias said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. "Not just strong, smart, thoughtful. You could do anything if you wanted." Mara felt something strange in her chest, a warmth she had no name for. No one had ever said such words to her before. Over the next days, Mara continued learning human ways. She helped Elias repair the ship, organize the cargo, and even cook in the small galley. She observed how he moved, how he adjusted plans on the fly, and how he trusted instinct over data. During a meal, Mara asked, "Why do humans value instinct over efficiency? Logic seems more certain." Elias smiled, leaning back. "Logic is good. But life isn't just numbers. Sometimes, the right choice is the one that feels right. Sometimes, it's not the fastest or easiest, but the one that matters most." Mara considered this. She realized that the Valeth never valued instinct. Everything was precise, measured, and predictable. They called differences flaws. Humans, they called them possibilities. One evening, as they were stargazing, Mara spoke again. "I have always been told I am too big, that I am unwanted." Elias's gaze softened. "They were wrong. You are just different. And sometimes, being different is the most powerful thing you can be." Her internal processors hummed with thought. Could she believe that? Could she finally trust that her size, her strength, her presence were not flaws? Elias seemed to sense her doubt. He stepped closer and said quietly, "Look at me, Mara. You're not too big. You're exactly what the universe needs sometimes. Strong enough to hold, brave enough to try, smart enough to see solutions no one else does. That's worth more than perfection." Thanks for watching. Mara's sensors recorded his words, storing them carefully. They felt heavy, but in a good way. A week later, the dustfall approached an asteroid settlement called Vernalis Outpost. It was a small community built into the rocky surface of a spinning asteroid. Humans lived there, but so did other species. The settlement was functional, messy, and alive, exactly what Elias had promised. As they landed, Mara felt nervous. She had never interacted with so many beings at once. The Valeth had always controlled every environment. Here, chaos and diversity thrived. She did not know how she would fit. Elias held her hand as they disembarked. "Just be yourself," he said. "They'll notice you for who you are, not what you weigh." Mara studied the settlers. Some were small and fragile, others large and strong. Some moved quickly, some slowly. Everyone seemed human-like in their patience and energy. One human, a young girl, ran up to Mara and stared at her wide-eyed. "You're huge," she said, her voice a mixture of awe and excitement. Mara stiffened, expecting ridicule. Instead, Elias laughed and ruffled the girl's hair. "She's big. Yes. Strong, too. And she's going to help us with the harvest tomorrow." The girl grinned. Mara watched as the others approached, curious and welcoming. No one turned her away. No one whispered insults. She realized, with a rush of understanding, that humans measured worth differently. They valued effort, courage, and kindness, not numbers or symmetry. The next day, Mara helped with the asteroid's hydroponic farms. Her strength made her unusually efficient, lifting large containers and rearranging support beams that others struggled with. But she noticed something even more important. Humans appreciated her effort, her presence. "See?" Elias said, watching her from nearby. "You're making a difference already. And they like it because it comes from you, not because it's perfect." Mara felt a strange pride. Not arrogance, not superiority, pride in being useful, being seen, being accepted. By the end of the day, Mara realized something profound. She was no longer measuring herself against impossible standards. She was seeing her own worth reflected in the eyes of others. That evening, as they returned to the dustfall, Mara hesitated. She had so many questions, so many emotions she could not name. Elias noticed and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said. "You don't have to understand it all at once. Just feel it. Accept it. You belong, Mara. Here. Now." Her systems recorded every detail: his tone, the warmth of his hand, the steadiness in his posture. Something new blossomed inside her. For the first time, she felt truly connected. "You," Mara began, then stopped. Words felt inadequate. She simply nodded, letting the silence convey more than language ever could. Elias smiled. "Good enough," he said. "That's what humans do. Sometimes, good enough is perfect." Mara watched him quietly. She realized she had never thought about humans as beings to admire. But now, she saw clearly. Humans were not perfect. They were messy, unpredictable, flawed, and capable of incredible kindness and courage. In that moment, Mara understood what Elias had meant before. Humanity's strength was not in symmetry, efficiency, or perfection. It was in the willingness to care, to hold, to trust, to lift others even when it was difficult, inconvenient, or unexpected. And she, Mara, was finally learning to do the same. As the dustfall lifted off from Vernalis outpost, Mara stood on the observation deck once more. She looked out at the endless stars, her mind alive with possibilities. She was not surplus. She was not too big. She was strong. She was capable. She was seen. And she was not alone. Elias approached quietly, placing a cup of steaming tea beside her. "You're learning fast," he said softly. Mara turned to him. "I am learning." She paused. "To be human?" Elias grinned. "In your own way. That's all anyone can ask." Mara allowed herself a small smile. She did not fully understand the warmth that filled her systems, but she knew it was real. She felt it in her chest, in her limbs, in the steady rhythm of her own presence. Humanity had gravity, not just physical, but emotional. It pulled her, shaped her, and made her feel rooted in ways she had never imagined. And for the first time, Mara realized she wanted to be more than strong. She wanted to belong. She wanted to matter. And for the first time, she believed that she could. The dustfall glided smoothly through the asteroid belt near Vernalis outpost, the small settlement gleaming under the distant light of a nearby sun. Mara stood at the observation deck, arms crossed, her eyes following the scattered mining ships as they moved between rocky outcrops. Every movement was precise, yet unpredictable like humans themselves. She realized with some amazement how much she had learned from Elias in just a few weeks. Humans valued adaptability, courage, and ingenuity. They valued action, motivated by care, not calculation. Mara had never encountered a civilization that worked this way. The Valeth had always been about efficiency, beauty, and predictability. Deviations were discarded, mistakes were punished. But here, mistakes were opportunities, and differences were strengths. Elias entered, carrying a small box of supplies for the settlement. He grinned when he saw her watching. "Thinking about them again?" he asked. Mara turned to him. "About the humans at Vernalis Outpost. About how they survive, and how they value things differently than my creators." Elias laughed softly. "Humans are messy, yes, but that's their secret. They keep what others throw away. Not just objects, but people too." Mara's sensors processed this. Keep what others throw away. She thought about the Valeth, about how she had been discarded for being too big. She had been considered surplus, useless. And yet, here she was, aboard the Dustfall, about to help a community thrive. That morning, Mara helped with repairs in the settlement's hydroponic farms. The framework had been damaged in a minor asteroid quake, and several of the support beams were loose. Most of the settlers were small, struggling to reach the higher structures. Mara's height and strength made her uniquely suited for the task. "Careful with the beams," a human shouted, trying to secure a support panel. Mara nodded, adjusting her grip. With careful precision, she lifted a large beam and positioned it perfectly in place. Her movements were deliberate, not rushed, and the beam held without issue. Elias watched nearby, his arms crossed, a proud smile on his face. "See? Not just strong, Mara. Thoughtful. That's the human way, strength guided by care." The settlers stared in awe. One of the older humans approached Mara, a small smile on his face. "We've never seen someone do that so smoothly. Thank you for helping." Mara hesitated. Gratitude was rare. Recognition even rarer. Her systems struggled to process the emotion she felt in response. Warmth. Pride. A strange satisfaction that had nothing to do with utility. Later, Mara and Elias walked through the settlement, observing the daily routines. Children ran between buildings, miners checked their equipment, and traders haggled quietly over supplies. Mara noticed small details: the way humans built devices to be repaired easily, the way they adapted old technology rather than discarding it, and the way they celebrated even minor successes. "They make everything useful," Mara said thoughtfully. "Exactly," Elias replied. "Humans see potential in what others throw away. Not just objects, but people. They lift what others discard. That's why they survive. That's why they thrive." Mara considered this carefully. She realized that she had been lifted herself, rescued from the judgment of the Valeth. And in turn, she was lifting the settlement, helping where her unique abilities could make a difference. It was a new kind of pride, one not rooted in perfection, efficiency, or approval, but in usefulness and acceptance. As evening fell, Elias invited Mara to join him on a scouting trip outside the settlement. They boarded a small shuttle and navigated through the asteroid belt, scanning for stray debris and potential hazards. Mara handled the controls with surprising ease, adapting quickly to human methods of navigation. "Impressive," Elias said, glancing at her. "You're learning faster than most humans. Most of them take months to get used to this." "I learn efficiently," Mara said. "But humans do not always follow efficiency. You adapt, observe, and improvise. That's what makes us resilient," Elias said quietly. "We don't just rely on numbers or charts. We rely on instinct, on teamwork, on seeing value where others do not." Mara nodded, her thoughts lingering on his words. She realized that humans' greatest strength was not technology, nor strength, nor intelligence. It was their capacity to care, to lift, and to protect. During one stop, the shuttle passed a cluster of smaller asteroids. Mara noticed a fragile structure, barely holding together under the gravitational pull of the nearby rocks. She immediately pointed it out. "See that?" she asked. "It could collapse if not reinforced. The inhabitants might be in danger." Elias studied it. "You're right. Let's check it out." They landed carefully, and Mara took the lead. She guided the humans, suggesting ways to reinforce beams and secure panels. Her physical strength made difficult tasks simple, and her logic provided the settlers with solutions they had not considered. One of the older settlers, a tall human with graying hair, looked at Mara with admiration. "We've never had someone help like this. You make a difference." Mara hesitated. She had always thought of herself as surplus, useless, too much for others to want. But here, in the eyes of these humans, she felt valued. Elias stepped closer, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "You see? This is what humans do. We don't discard what's different. We keep it. We nurture it. We help it grow. That's the real strength of humanity." Mara's system struggled to describe the sensation she felt. Warmth, belonging, pride. She realized that humans measured worth differently. They valued effort, courage, and presence more than conformity or perfection. Back on the dustfall, Mara reflected on the day. She moved through the corridors quietly, her thoughts filled with observations. Elias noticed her pensive expression and approached her. "Thinking about what you accomplished today?" he asked. "Yes," Mara replied. "I helped them, and they were grateful. I did not expect that." Elias smiled softly. "That's the thing about humans. We see value in effort and intention, not just results. You helped, and that's enough." Mara considered this. The Valeth had only valued results, efficiency, and perfection. Effort, intention, and presence were meaningless to them. But humans understood something she had never truly known. That being present, being willing, being capable of care, was itself a form of power. That night, Mara stood again at the observation deck, staring at the stars. The settlement lay below, quiet now except for the occasional hum of machinery. She thought about the Valeth, about their cold logic and strict rules. She thought about the humans, about Elias, about the settlers she had helped, and she realized something profound. Humans did not fear difference. They embraced it. They did not discard the unusual. They lifted it, and in that lifting, they created strength far greater than any design, calculation, or protocol could ever achieve. Elias joined her quietly, handing her a warm drink. "You're thinking too much," he said, smiling. Mara smiled faintly in return. "I am thinking about humans. And what they keep what matters," Elias said softly. "Not because it's perfect, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. And you are worth it, Mara. Don't ever doubt that." Mara felt her chest warm in a way she had never felt before. Recognition, acceptance, care. These were not mechanical responses. They were real. And for the first time, she felt complete. She looked out at the stars, then back at Elias. "I understand," she said quietly. "I see now. I see what humans value. I see why they survive, why they thrive." Elias smiled, proud but humble. "And now, you're part of it. Part of what humans keep. Not because you're perfect, but because you're you." Mara processed the words slowly. Perfect? No. Needed? Yes. Valuable? Beyond measure. For the first time in her existence, Mara felt truly whole. She had been discarded once, labeled as surplus, told she was too big, but humans had lifted her. Humans had seen her worth, and she, in turn, was lifting the lives of others. Mara knew, without question, that she belonged. And the greatest strength of all of humans, of herself, and of life itself, was not in what could be measured, controlled, or optimized. It was in the courage to care, the courage to lift, the courage to keep what others discard. And that, Mara realized, was bigger than any star. The dustfall moved steadily through the asteroid belt, carrying its cargo of hope, tools, and people. Mara stood at the observation deck, her gaze fixed on the stars. The universe seemed vast, infinite, and yet she no longer felt small within it. The past weeks had been unlike anything she had ever experienced. She had been discarded, labeled too big, told she was unwanted. She had known the cold logic of the Valeth, the harsh calculations that measured worth only in efficiency, symmetry, and appearance. Now, Mara understood something entirely different. Worth was not measured in charts or numbers. Worth was measured in courage, effort, care, and presence. Humans had shown her that. Elias had shown her that. And Mara had begun to show herself. That morning, the dustfall approached Vernalis outpost again. Mara had been invited to assist the settlement with a critical project. Reinforcing the main mining hub. A recent microquake had loosened several support beams, and the settlement's engineers were struggling to stabilize the structure. Mara's presence made a difference immediately. Her height allowed her to reach beams others could not. Her strength made heavy work simple, and her intelligence helped her see solutions the human engineers had overlooked. "Careful with that beam," one of the miners called out. Mara nodded, adjusting her grip. She lifted the beam smoothly, then positioned it with precision. The structure stabilized immediately. Elias watched from nearby, a proud smile on his face. "See?" he said softly. "Not just strong, Mara. You're thoughtful. You solve problems. You make a difference." Mara processed his words. No one had ever said such things to her before. They had not been measured in efficiency or perfection, but in effort and care. And that recognition was more powerful than any calculation. The human settlers quickly began to trust her judgment. Mara coordinated teams, suggested reinforcements, and even proposed an innovative way to distribute weight using materials they had on hand. Her design was unconventional, unlike anything the Valeth would approve, yet it worked flawlessly. "You have a gift," one of the settlers said quietly. "Not just strength. Vision. You see what others miss." Mara hesitated. She had always been told that differences were flaws. That being too big, too strong, too unusual was a problem. But now she realized those differences were strengths. Her size, her power, her perspective, they were all assets. Elias approached, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Humans don't discard what's different," he said softly. "We lift it, nurture it, and help it grow. That's what makes us strong. And that's why you're so important here, Mara." Mara felt warmth spread through her chest. Acceptance, belonging, care. These were not instructions to follow or parameters to meet. They were feelings, real and undeniable. After the repairs were complete, Mara and Elias returned to the dustfall. They moved in silence for a while, both observing the stars and the settlement below. The quiet was comfortable, not empty. Mara felt a new sensation she had never encountered before. Contentment. "You know," Elias said finally, breaking the silence, "humans have always survived because we see value in things others ignore. We lift what others discard, and we protect what others overlook." Mara nodded. "I see that now. I understand why you thrive." Elias glanced at her, his eyes warm. "And now, you're part of that. You're not surplus. You're not too big. You're needed, and you're valued." Mara absorbed the words slowly. She had spent her entire life being measured against standards she could never meet. Now she realized that those standards had never defined her. Her value came from who she was, what she could do, and the care she showed others. And in that moment, she felt a quiet certainty. She belonged. The next days were filled with small victories. Mara taught the settlers how to handle heavy materials safely, how to reinforce their tools efficiently, and how to approach problems with both strength and thoughtfulness. Children watched her with wide eyes, inspired by her abilities and her kindness. One evening, a young girl approached Mara timidly. "I've never seen anyone like you," she said softly. "You're big and strong, but also nice. You help without asking for anything in return." Mara paused, unsure how to respond. "I help because it is necessary," she said. Then she added quietly, and because it feels right, the girl smiled. I hope I can be like you someday. Mara felt an unfamiliar swell of pride. She had been taught that being too big was a flaw. Now, she realized it could inspire others. Her presence, her strength, her willingness to act, it mattered. And for the first time, she understood that being different could be the greatest gift. That night, Mara returned to the observation deck. Elias joined her with a cup of warm tea. They stood side by side, looking out at the stars, stretching endlessly into the void. You've come a long way, Elias said quietly. Not just physically, but inside. You've learned what humans understand naturally. Strength is more than muscle. Worth is more than numbers. And the greatest power is the ability to lift others. Mara looked at him, her chest warm. I have learned to see myself differently, to understand my purpose, to value myself not for what others expected, but for what I can contribute. Elias smiled, his hand brushing hers. And that's why I said it before, and I'll say it again. You're perfect in my arms, Mara. Not because of perfection, but because of who you are. And who you are is extraordinary. Mara processed his words slowly. Perfect? Extraordinary? She had been called too big, surplus, unwanted. Now she realized that the words she had feared were meaningless. Her true worth came from action, care, and presence. She looked out at the stars, then back at Elias. I understand. And I belong. Days passed, and Mara fully embraced her role among the humans at Vernalis Outpost. She became a mentor, a protector, and a problem solver. The settlers relied on her guidance, and she took pride not in accolades, but in their success. Elias continued to guide her gently, allowing her independence while supporting her growth. Together, they repaired, built, and explored. Their bond deepened. Unspoken, yet undeniable. They understood each other not through words alone, but through action, presence, and care. One evening, after a long day of repairs, Mara and Elias sat atop a hill overlooking the settlement. The twin suns of the nearby system cast long shadows across the rocky terrain, painting the landscape in gold and crimson. You've changed everything here, Elias said softly. Not just because of your strength or skill, but because of your heart. You lift others in ways they didn't even know they needed. Mara's sensors recorded the scene, but she also felt it in her chest. She realized the truth of humanity. It was not technology, not speed, not numbers that made them special. It was care. It was lifting what others discard. It was seeing worth where others see none. And now, she was part of it. Mara began, struggling to find the words. I am no longer surplus. I am part of something greater. Elias reached out, holding her hand gently. Exactly. And the universe is better because you're in it. Months later, representatives from the Valith Collective arrived unexpectedly. They had heard of Mara's presence, of her work with humans, and they came to reclaim what they once considered surplus. They spoke in precise, formal language, presenting contracts and legal documents. Mara stood firm beside Elias. I am no longer your asset, she said clearly. I have chosen my path. I serve the settlement, and I serve those who value care, courage, and presence over efficiency alone. The Valith representatives hesitated. They had never encountered a sentient who refused their orders so confidently. They had never seen someone defy logic so completely. Elias stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. She is not your property. She is a part of our community. And we don't discard what matters. Mara looked around at the settlement, at the humans who had welcomed her, who had taught her the power of care. She felt a deep certainty. Her worth was not defined by the Valith. Her worth was defined by action, by heart, by presence. The Valith finally withdrew, muttering calculations that could not account for human resilience or the courage of a sentient who chose her own path. As the dustfall lifted off into space once more, Mara stood at the observation deck, her hands resting on the railing. Elias joined her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You see now?" he asked softly. "Being different isn't a flaw. Being too big isn't a problem. It's a gift. And you are extraordinary." Mara turned to him, a small smile on her face. "I see now. And I am grateful. Not just for your guidance, but for humans. For their strength, their care, their courage. I belong." Elias smiled, the stars reflecting in his eyes. "And we're better because you're here. Bigger than any star, stronger than any obstacle, and willing to lift what others cannot. That's what humans do. And that's what you do." Mara felt a surge of warmth. She looked out at the endless stars, the infinite possibilities ahead, and realized she had truly found her place, not as surplus, not as too big, but as herself. And for the first time in her existence, Mara understood the truth. Humans do not fear difference. They do not discard what others throw away. They lift it, nurture it, and carry it forward. And she would do the same, stronger, braver, whole. And in Elias's arms, Mara felt not only safety, but belonging, purpose, and the quiet, steady certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The dustfall glided onward, carrying its crew toward new stars, new challenges, and new adventures. And Mara, once discarded, once labeled too big, now stood ready to lift the universe in her own way. Bigger than the stars, stronger than doubt, and fully human in her heart.